Okay, hey everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm giving everybody the ability to record and we'll get started here in just a moment.
Yep. Oh wait, no, this one's old.
And also just a reminder to please mute yourself too.
Yeah, so the package is mostly about COVID.
They're
Or
celebrities.
Okay, if you don't have the ability to record and you need it, please just drop me a note in the chat and I'll take care of it.
Okay. All right, thank you for joining us. Today we have Dr. David Kimberlin with us. He is the director of UAB's Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases and treats patients at Children's of Alabama. He is also the editor of the American Academy of Pediatrics Red Book, and in this role, he helps set vaccination milestones and information on behalf of the Academy. He is an expert in infectious diseases and specifically in vaccine development. He is a great resource to discuss how people can find accurate information and sift through what is inaccurate, particularly during these times. Today, he is here to talk about COVID and vaccine information, COVID in children, and general information related to COVID-19. Dr. Kimberlin will provide a brief statement and then we will open it up to questions. Please use the raise your hand tool when you're ready to ask a question and we will take it from there. You're also able to put your question in chat where we will also be able to see it. Just as a reminder, once this wraps up, we will email a link to this recording where you will be able to download the video and sound. I will turn it over to Dr. Kimberlin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of what I know are busy days to talk about what's a really important topic, and that's where we are in this pandemic, and what tools and opportunities that these new two COVID vaccines that we have, and hopefully more coming along, really offer us in terms of trying to see the other side of all of this, of getting back to normal, in other words, getting back to life in the pre-pandemic kind of way. In addition to the roles that I play, not only here at UAB and Children's of Alabama, but also with the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, I'm also one of two AAP liaisons to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP. And as you all know, the ACIP, we had an emergency meeting yesterday, has been meeting pretty much monthly, if not several times a month, to prepare for the new COVID vaccines as they become available and to make recommendations, those phases, phase 1A, 1B, 1C, and 2, and so forth, for who should be receiving the vaccines as we get increasing supplies. And so I hope anyway that sort of front and center involvement with the ACIP and with the AAP will be of benefit as we spend this next hour or so together fielding questions. One of the most important things I really would like to leave with you and with the folks that may be listening to this or reading about it is how important it is to have accurate information. You know, there's an awful lot of information out there on social media, on some TV stations and so forth. And it really doesn't help if you're getting inaccurate information. You need the facts, you need the scientific understanding and the medical interpretation of that. And so I really encourage everyone to rely on public health officials, the CDC at the national level, the Alabama Department of Public Health at the state level, county health departments, depending what county you're in, your physicians, academic medical centers. Rely on folks that have really immersed their lives and so many decades of training in this to really best understand what these vaccines offer us and just how beneficial and how safe they really are.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberlin. Now we'll open it up to questions. And again, you can either raise your hand or put your question in chat. We can start with one question is, when do you think children will be eligible to receive the vaccine, or will they be eligible to receive the vaccine?
Eventually, yes. I think children will be in the groups that are recommended to receive the vaccine. But for the most part, the overwhelming majority of years that someone's in childhood, those years have not been studied yet with these vaccines. The Pfizer vaccine that was approved or authorized, I should say, in November and recommended in December, that particular vaccine has been evaluated in 16 years of age and up. So 16 and 17-year-olds technically in the pediatric age range have been evaluated there. And Pfizer has now completed enrollment on ages down to 12 years of age. Moderna's vaccine, on the other hand, was evaluated initially in 18 year of age and up, so in adults. And they are now enrolling on a 12 through 17 year study that will be able to show benefit and safety in that kind of adolescent population. And both of those companies, as I understand it, are planning on kind of age de-escalating, going down to younger and younger years, but those studies are still in development at this particular time.
Thank you. We'll start with Alan Collins. Alan, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Savannah. Doctor, you open up with misinformation. What is the biggest misinformation about the vaccine that you are seeing out there and concerns you the most?
There's a lot of inaccurate information, and a lot of it, I think, is driven by the reality that these are new vaccines. But I want to emphasize that the size of studies that were conducted for both the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are very typical for the size of studies done for any vaccine that's approved for use in children or in adults. In the case of the Pfizer vaccine, 44,000 people enrolled on that study. With the Moderna vaccine, 30,000 people. And of course, several hundred, if not 1,000 or so more in the earlier stages of those two vaccine developments. So if you add that together, just for those two vaccines, we've had 75,000 people in whom the vaccines have been studied. So we know a lot about the safety of these vaccines. We know a tremendous amount about how really beneficial they are. Now, it's hard to kind of anticipate what the misinformation is. And so I guess I would be better served to kind of have a question posed to me about a particular thing that I can, provide a different perspective on or insights into, rather than trying to anticipate what those areas of misinformation might be.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Lauren Walsh with ABC 3340. Lauren, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Doctor, for making time for us today. We saw the health department yesterday announce that the UK variant of COVID-19 is now in Alabama. 2 of the cases, they said, were in children under 19 years old. Can you tell us what this new variant means for children and how it is different, or possibly is it more severe than the strain we already had for children?
We're learning a lot on a day-by-day basis about these new variants. There's the UK variant. That's the one that, I think yesterday the Alabama Department of Public Health made an announcement. They've detected 3 cases in Alabama. There are other variants as well. There's South African variants. There's Brazilian variants. There are variants in California and other places. And I think as we look more, we're almost certainly going to find additional variants over time. One of the aspects of these variants that appears to be happening, and I say appears because these are really quite newly recognized, but they do appear to transmit more readily between people, and that also seems to apply to children too, that they're more easily transmissible. Doesn't seem right now that they are more lethal or that they cause more severe disease. But of course, as you have more people infected, just by the sheer numbers, you're going to have more people with severe disease, not because any particular person has a more aggressive strain, but rather because you've got more people infected, and each strain can cause significant illness in a given person. So I think we have a lot more to learn still. It does not surprise me. It doesn't surprise any of us really that this B117 variant that had first been detected in the UK, that it's been detected in Alabama. I think all of us really anticipated that it's been circulating here and across the United States for some time. I think what this shows, though, is that our systems for detecting that variant and perhaps other variants that may be here now or may be coming here that system is beginning to work well. And that's a good thing. I think that'll give us eyes on the ground, if you will, in terms of being able to watch for these variants as they emerge, and then also watch and see what they do within a population. Right now, that appears to be increasing spread, more ease of spread from person to person. That creates its own challenges and own responses that will be necessary over time. Does not appear right now that it's more aggressive in terms of the disease that it causes, though, and that's relatively good news.
Thank you. The next question is from Magdala Lusant, who's with NBC 13. She asks, can we get a reaction from Dr. Kimberlin on 2 Alabama children under the age of 19 testing positive for the United Kingdom COVID-19 strain? Also, should we be surprised on this? I know you touched on that a little bit in your previous answer.
I think that as we apply more and more sequencing tools, looking at particular viruses that are detected in people, and we sequence it, and that allows us to say whether it's the kind of standard virus that's been circulating largely throughout 2020, or if it's some of these newer variants, this UK variant being one. I think we're going to find more variants here. And that's not just in Alabama, that's going to be across the United States. So as we look for it, I think we're likely to find it. And I think that's going to be the case for children as well as for adults. What it tells me, though, is that we cannot let up on what we're doing right now. We can't let our guard down, even though it's really truly miraculous, amazing that we have these 2 vaccines. We may have 1 or 2 more in front of us just in the next, handful of weeks. That's really phenomenal, and we should celebrate that. But it also means that we have got to get those vaccines into people's arms. We've got to continue to mask and social distance and density reduce during the times that we're getting more and more people vaccinated. And really, these variants sort of have like a ticking clock for us in terms of wanting to accelerate those vaccination programs to the maximum extent possible, because the more people you have vaccinated, the more people you have immune to this virus, the broad stroke of this virus, then the harder it is for the virus to spread from person to person, and therefore the harder it is for it to develop new variants. If it's running amok among the population, it can pretty much evolve as it wants to. But if you make it harder to be able to find someone to infect, then it's going to decrease the likelihood that we're going to see more of these variants. We have to keep masking. We have to keep social distancing. We have to keep avoiding large crowds. And when our time is called in terms of these phased groups to receive the vaccine, please roll up your sleeve and receive the vaccine.
Thank you. The next question is from the Alabama Political Reporter. And Micah asks, many people express a deep distrust of big pharma, and that skepticism seems to extend to the medical industry. What can you say about those suspicions and how people should inform themselves?
It's a really good question. Not only do we have suspicion of pharma and the medical field, if you will, we have suspicions of church. We have suspicion of political sides, one way or the other. We have suspicions of big business. I mean, we're in a doubtful period in our country. That's just a factual statement. I would suggest probably throughout the world it's that way. What I would suggest is that when you're thinking about where to get information, it's important to get information from someone who has really dedicated her life or his life to understanding that. Not someone who's new to the game, but somebody who's really been working at this from the time they were teenagers on. And I would suggest that that's the folks in public health, that's the folks in the state and county health departments. It's your doctor who spends time out of her day to make sure that you're well or takes care of your child and so forth. For example, this is you're going to understand the parallel here. I'm not a mechanic. I don't know anything about cars. If my car breaks, I take it to the mechanic who works on it. And later in the day, he calls me and he says, David, here's what's wrong with your car and here's what we need to do about it. And my question is not, well, where did you get that information? Tell me about the computer system you used to make that diagnosis. I want to understand the supply chain of that particular part. I want to know everything there is to know about that particular issue with my car. That's not my answer. My answer is, yes, sir, let's do that, because he knows a whole lot more about cars than I do. And I would suggest it's really not any different with medicine. Go and ask good questions, inform yourself. No, that's a good thing. But get that information from the folks who know what to tell you.
Great comparison. Thank you. The next question is from Mike Royer. Mike, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I would. Dr. Kimberlin, thanks very much for joining us. Are you hearing me just fine?
Yes, sir, I am.
We had a big celebration in the streets of Tuscaloosa a couple of weeks back over a football game you may have heard about. And there was great concern at the time from the medical community that our students would catch the virus from being so close together. Many of them, maybe most of them, did not have masks on. Our mayor and other local officials have said now there doesn't seem to be infections from that. They don't think it caused a major problem. From your medical perspective, would that be kind of dumb luck, or maybe they were separated enough? What's your thoughts about an example like that where we were fearful of a spread and so far we've not seen it? What's your thoughts about that?
I think as we came out of the lockdown period in the spring and then, kind of persevered through the summer, as we got into the fall and into the wintertime, people became antsy. They wanted to get out. They wanted to be around other people. They want to try to have some normal interactions. And you get into the holiday season, you want to be with your family and all of those things. And I certainly understand that, no doubt about it. I will say this, though, each time we've had those kinds of opportunities for people to travel and to gather in groups and be around people who are not in their immediate family or their immediate household, every single time that's happened, whether it's after Halloween or after Thanksgiving or after Christmas or after a big celebration, we've seen increases in cases. And so I hope that I'm wrong. But I would not be surprised to still see those cases increase following a big gathering, even from as long back as 2 weeks ago. It takes time for the virus to then begin to spread among people it wasn't going to be spreading in before because they weren't around each other. It takes time for that to occur, and then either those people to become sick themselves, and by sick I mean like needing to be hospitalized, or for them to spread it to their grandparents, for instance, and for those more vulnerable people to then get sick enough to go into the hospital. So, if we have that same question 6 weeks from now and nothing's happened, then I will gladly say we dodged a bullet. I don't think we're far enough out from that to be able to say that at this time. It's the reason we have to continue to be diligent. We cannot let our guard down yet. We will be able to one day. And that day, hopefully, will be within several months, but not right now.
Thank you. The next question is from NBC 13. The question is, Dr. Fauci has said double masking could help with the new variant. Should children double mask too?
I think right now, the most important thing is just to wear a mask and to maintain distance from people and to not be in large crowds. If you want a double mask, that's okay. With young children, they're putting on a mask or two masks. You got to make sure that it's not so large that it covers their whole face, for instance, that they can still breathe, you can still watch them and so on. And that's why we generally say 2 years and over for masking, not a very young infant, in other words. Also, children, they certainly can get infected. They can get very sick from this. They can spread this. But unlike influenza, for instance, which really oftentimes is spread in a community, the nidus for that in a community is the younger child or a school-based setting. With this particular pandemic virus, the coronavirus, that doesn't seem to be the case. And the CDC recently released a pretty in-depth study of that, or report on that. And it's good news for parents. It's good news for children. I think it's good news for schools. We still have to protect teachers. But I do think that the risk to the child is, relatively speaking, lower than for an older adult. Now, we still have to make sure it's not spreading among children, because if it spreads among children, it's going to be spreading among adults, and spreading among adults, it's going to be spreading among children. So in the same way that we've got to decrease the amount of virus throughout the community, children are part of that community, and that has to be part of it. But I don't think we need to target, if you will, children at this particular time any more than we normally would do with our standard distancing, density reduction, and regular masking.
Thank you. The next question is from the Alabama Political Reporter, and it is, what role do you think public officials should play in the messaging and communication about public health and vaccines at this juncture? Should they step back or step up in the messaging, or does that responsibility fall elsewhere?
I think all of us have a responsibility to be leaders. And you know, I've been speaking a lot about the public health and the medical field in terms of really following their advice and following their leadership. And I think ultimately these are scientific questions and they ought to be addressed by scientists. Now, having said that, political leadership is critically important. You know, that's our form of government, and it's a good thing. We need our leaders to be well versed in the information, and we need for them to support their medical leaders in the state, for instance, or in their county. This is not a battle. This is not a war or a fight, you know, between the medical side and the political leadership, or between the business community and the hospitals. That kind of a digression with this is, it does only serves to you know, hurt all of us. We are all moving in the same direction. We all want the same things. We want schools to fully reopen and remain open to in-person learning. We want businesses to be open. We want to get rid of these masks. To do that, we've all got to work together. And that means that the political leadership needs to have a single voice on this also. And I would suggest that that voice is best served when the words that are coming in their ears are from, you know, the reputable scientific community that's part of the public health leadership across this country.
Thank you. This question is from Sarah with AL.com. She asks, is it necessary for if it is necessary for vaccine makers to put out new vaccines to address the new variants, how will that change or complicate the vaccine rollout process?
These variants that we're talking about today and really have been on all of our minds for the last few weeks, we need to learn a lot more about them. We are learning a lot each day, but there's a lot more yet to be learned. I think that the pharmaceutical companies, especially Pfizer and Moderna, where they have the mRNA vaccines that can be adjusted so rapidly, that Moderna in particular is already working on, according to their press releases, working on a modification to their vaccine that would address, I believe, the South African strain. So one of the benefits of these mRNA platforms is that they can be modified quickly. Now, do we need to do that? That's what we don't know right now. The studies that have come out so far, and these are not very many studies, and there are very few people. So there's what we know today may not be what we know a week from now or a month from now. So keep that in mind. What we know right now looks pretty reassuring. It looks like people getting the current vaccines have protection, have immunity even against most of these new variants. One South African variant that's not here in the US to our knowledge seemed to have a less good neutralization or annihilation by an immune response from somebody who'd been vaccinated. But even that, you know, was small numbers of people, and we need to know more. So what do we need to do right now? Well, we need to do our part. And when your slot is called, when your group is called, you need to get the vaccine. That's the best way to protect yourself and the best way to help your community. In addition, we have to wear masks, we have to social distance, we have to be in smaller groups and not in large groups, the standard things we've been doing. And the pharmaceutical companies need to be prepared, and they are getting prepared as we learn more about these new variants. If they develop a vaccine that is not needed, great, you know, but if the worst case scenario would be if we find out X number of months down the road that we do need it, and they've not been doing the work so far. So I'm delighted with what I'm reading in the papers and hearing on the news reports that they're putting that kind of effort in now. And if we do get to the point of needing those down the road, then we've got to understand whether it would be like a booster dose for those that have already been vaccinated, whether it would actually replace the current vaccines. Those are questions we just simply don't know the answer to yet.
And this is a follow-up question in regards to the Brazil variant. So this is also from AL.com. She says, the Brazil variant has spread at a very rapid pace. What might this mean for Alabama?
I think any of these variants that we're talking about here this afternoon have, for the most of them anyway, have been showing the capability of spreading more rapidly, and that's why they seem to be becoming the predominant strains in other countries, because they spread more easily from person to person. And so, if you have a virus that spreads more, one virus A that spreads more easily, and virus B spreads less easily, then A is going to be able to get through the community more rapidly, and you end up with more people infected with A, as an example. And so right now, we need to be mindful of this. I don't think we need to be scared, any more scared than we normally are, with respect to the pandemic. But I don't think it changes what we know already, and that is currently the understanding that we have is that the vaccines that we are currently using, the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, the immunity that they induce in someone who's vaccinated, that immunity is sufficient to snuff out the variants, the Brazil variant, the UK variant, and so forth. Now, whether that stays true over time, we don't know, but right now that seems to be the case. So when your group is called, get vaccinated. And between now and then and after then, wear your masks, don't be around large groups of people, and make sure you're 6 feet or more apart from the people that you are around. And those kinds of things that we now all know like the back of our hands, those are going to be the kinds of things that get us through this period as we learn more about the variants, including the Brazilian variant, and we learn more about what risk it's causing to us or posing to us, and what we need to do additionally to be able to address those risks.
Great. Okay, we have a few more questions, then we will wrap up. The next question, I will send it to Alan Collins with Fox 6. Alan, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, doctor. To add, you mentioned our children, they're down the line getting vaccine and everything. They're returning to the classroom. Now we have the variant virus in Alabama. Do you have concerns? All the positive numbers we're seeing, like the latest at-risk statewide map, it's all low and moderate. It's looking great. Do you have any concerns? We could see a turnaround here, and children could be playing a role in that turnaround.
Until we are done with this pandemic, I'm going to have concerns every single day. All we have to do is look back to after Halloween, for instance, and the numbers, the rising number of cases that we saw after people let their guard down. And so that concern is a baseline concern for me and a baseline concern for other, scientists and medical folks across the country. Do the variants increase that degree of concern? Somewhat, but not to the point where we should be doing anything different than we already know that we need to do. I do think as well, we have to think about with schools, what we know. Now, we are in a different place at the end of January of 2021 than we were in March and April of 2020. We know a lot more about the coronavirus that has been circulating, and we're learning more about the variants as well. What we now know is that at least with our experience through the fall, that children can be in school if the schools have the resources to be able to do the things necessary to try to keep circulation low in school. I think for me, probably the biggest risk in being in school is during lunchtime when you got to take your mask off to eat lunch, and so that's a risk. But there are ways that people can change the way you sit in a classroom, or if you're eating there, or in a lunchroom if you're eating there, to be able to mitigate that, to be able to deal with that. And we certainly know that not being in school also poses risks to children, emotional risks, educational risks, and so forth. So we're going to continue to have this tension, this balance that we need to strike between, trying to get, in this case, children back to an educational environment that really they need in order to be able to thrive across their lifetimes on the one hand, and on the other hand, being as safe about it as we possibly can. And as we learn more about these variants, recommendations may need to change. But for right now, we need to keep doing what it is that we already know works: wearing masks, social distancing, not being in large crowds.
Okay, unless there are any other questions that I'm not seeing or people are not raising their hands, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, Dr. Kimberlin, for joining us and for all this valuable information. Once again, we will send out a link to this recording via email in just a few minutes. Thank you all.
Thank you all.